Greetings, 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 and greetings once again. Welcome to the program, The Silence of Our Friends. The Silence of Our Friends is now live streaming. So please take a moment and tag someone if you're over on the Facebook side of the world. Share, look at the very bottom left or bottom right corner, depending on your device, and see the word share. If you'll press that word, it will initiate sharing this to your Facebook page. This will be, I believe, one of those programs that will be insightful, both insightful and directional, affecting people's lives perhaps for generations and unraveling so many of the misgivings and misinformation that has affected Black and brown people and the majority of white people, perhaps even in this country of ours. So please take a moment and do the right thing and help us to increase our Facebook impact, if you will. So share, tag, text someone and tell them that the broadcast is live. And for those of you who are visiting with us over on the YouTube side of the world, if you would subscribe, just press the little word that says subscribe. It's self-explanatory, and that will help you with no cost. It will help to increase our YouTube space and to increase our electronic audience. We're trying to affect as many people as we can, and you can help us. If all the Facebook people would come over to YouTube, you don't have to stay, but if you would just subscribe, make sure and subscribe to the YouTube channel, as you have been long-time Facebook followers as well. We're attempting to increase our YouTube audience in all of our arenas, if you will. So thank you for helping us. We appreciate you so much. It's 6:30 p.m. Well, beyond. Had a few technical difficulties, but we are live and in person here, and we appreciate you being there. So let's try to give a few minutes for people to log on so we can get this party started, get this show on the road, and make it happen. These are all probably closer to metaphors or idiomatic expressions, but here we are. Before we get too far into the program, vote, 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 vote. Did I say vote? Yes, absolutely. Vote again. We have a general election that is coming up on the first Tuesday in the month of November 2020. And with the way things have been going in these yet to be United States, we need a change in Washington. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to calculate the change, nor does it take someone with more eyesight than Stevie Wonder to see that we need a change in Washington. I thought this program tonight was really going to be about the greater good, or its reciprocal, the lesser of evils. That may be next week's show, but I'll lead to it as quickly as I can. Politics is really not about a perfect candidate or a perfect political party. Politics is really about voting for the greater good, or the lesser of evils. Everyone involved in politics is going to have some problem. Is going to have something that has impacted or affected them. They'll have some negativity, some taint, something that will cause the jaundiced or raised eyebrow. But we are under obligation to vote for the better candidate with the better track record of all that has been presented. So vote, vote, vote. And don't forget, if you haven't already, if you will, please affect your community in a positive way by completing the census, census2020.gov. Now, that is impactful for 10 years. You wonder why certain communities are so run down for so long. Well, federal dollars are released into communities based on population. And if we always dodge or run away from or never involve ourselves in the census, then this is in rural settings as well as the city settings. You talk about street lights coming to your area. That costs money. You talk about road pavings, $1 million per mile. That's very expensive. Appropriations come from the federal government for that. Schools, libraries, first responders. responders. Everything you need in your community comes as a result of the effects of the census, which lasts for 10 years. And so let's get into it tonight. I want to continue. I thought we'd be finished with this by now, but it looks like every time we complete a particular show, something comes up in the news that is connected to the title of the previous show. So here we are again. All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter Part 4. Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter Part 4. The case of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor. Did her life matter? Did her life matter to the same degree and consequence of another 27-year-old, her, let's just say her composite equal? If Breonna Taylor's name was Molly Taylor or Andrea Taylor, and she was 27-year-old white white American woman in the United States, would the verdict, the outcome of the Breonna Taylor case or Molly Taylor case be the same? So let's go into it. When something matters, this means that life as it was, normalcy, if you will, cannot continue because the matter is of such significance, such impact, or such dire consequence that interruptions are dictated by the misgiving or the miscarrying of a particular impact of a thing. So if something matters, something else will be interrupted or affected by the consequence of the matter. If life goes on unaffected, if the wheels keep rolling the same as they always have, if everything is perpetual and nothing has a break or a point of cessation, then it does the thing spoken of did not matter. And so every time we come together, I like to justify our show. Some people would say to me, because I'm a pastor and because I've been involved in church work, the kingdom of God, for many years, they would think that that's your arena. Stay out of the world's arena and just affect the corner where you are or the church arena. But apparently someone forgot to mention this to many of the Bible characters of prolific consequence. For example, Elijah over in the book of the Kings, First Kings, and I think a little bit of this impacted Second Kings as well, but I know the book of First Kings, particularly chapters 17, 18, 19, so forth. Elijah addressed an evil woman by the name of Jezebel, who was the queen, that's political, of Israel. Her husband was the king, a man by the name of Ahab. And because of her her interference with the Hebrews' worship of the true and living God, the God of the Bible, and then she puts a hit out on the prophet, the premier prophet of Israel was Elijah. She interferes again with the exclusive worship of the Hebrew God Yahweh, or the God of the Bible, disregarded the rights of the common people, and defied Elijah. So Elijah addressed her, prophesied to her, prophesied actually her death to her. So this is truth speaking to power. This was a churchman, if you will, addressing political ills and political misgivings. So again, St. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. And the last time I checked, salt has an impact if it's ever involved at all. You know salt, when it introduces itself to food, it impacts the flavor. It causes something bland to be turned around, and it becomes food of note because of the influence of the salt. And Jesus goes on to say, if the salt has lost its savor, its ability to influence the taste of the food, metaphorically speaking, if the people of God lose their influence and impact on the world, and the world is the stockpile from which God draws all and has drawn all of us and will continue to draw people. But the church, believing people, have to have salt and have to have impact on the unbelieving and sometimes confused world. And he says, if the salt loses its savor, it's thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out, one, and then trodden under the feet of men too. So let's get into it even more. You know, Dr. King makes the statement a long time ago, what will be remembered in the end will not be the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And we cannot afford to be silent where injustice occurs, devaluation occurs, pejorative impacts cannot be tolerated any longer. And he says again in another place, nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance or conscientious stupidity. I like to start off like that because I believe everything fits, and perhaps everyone fits in one of those two categories. Either they are sincerely ignorant, good people, good-hearted persons, maybe even church people that say they love Jesus, but they're yet ignorant of the facts, have never had certain experiences such as living in these yet to be United States while black, attempting to have gainful employment or start businesses or to have credit extended while black, to pay off bills while black, to establish yourself in a world, in a society, in a republic that has never given equal value to people of color. And in my valuation, and in my mind, we are, in the words of Malcolm X, the chickens have come home to roost, which simply means that certain things were sown at a certain previous point in time, and now the harvest has come and impacted the ground wherein that particular seed was sown. And then the second category, of course, is that of conscientious stupidity. The learned, conscientious, they're able to think. They've been taught to be critical in their approach, but yet they come up and come back and deal with things and affairs in life, and particularly people, in a category of stupidity, lunacy. They relegate everything to color, creed, gender, so forth and so on. Sometimes stereotypical responses. And so this program is designed to combat that, to address it with the cold, hard facts. So why examine Breonna Taylor or any other black or brown person affected by a miscarriage of justice? Why not just throw up your hands and say, well, there we go again. It's happened again. And mom is the word. No comments, no actions, no seeking forth for the truth, no praying and asking the Lord for leadership in terms of what can I do? How can I impact this cruel world system that is sometimes spinning the wrong way based on its level and its spheres of injustice? Well, again, Dr. King, in the letter from the Birmingham jail, makes this statement. He says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We're caught, and I continue the quote, we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, he said, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That is powerful. And again, my belief is not the superiority or inferiority of any race. I don't believe that blacks and brown people should be superior to white people being then the inferior. I don't believe, as it stands now in this country, that whites should be supreme because of beliefs, because of certain held beliefs and passed on beliefs and opportunities, privilege. Nor do I believe that blacks and brown people should be inferior. I believe God made all men, created all men to be equal. But the question in this country becomes that of, are black and brown people truly humans in the sense of value? Now, I think it comes down to a question of two words I would like to submit to you. In my mind, justice being carried out indiscriminately, that means without regard to partialities, biases, so forth and so on, is a question of how the justice system and how people handle two words. The first is the word worth. Worth, WORTH, the quality of a thing, which renders it useful. How people see black and brown people as far as the question of worth is concerned. When we come into judicial systems and relegated to judicial matters, are we judicated? Are we assessed in the courtroom as far as the law is concerned, as far as employment, housing are concerned, as far as business upstarts are concerned, and so forth, as far as our being placed and our maybe selection as black and brown people to, or election to participate in large white churches and white congregation. Okay, well, how do you see me or assess me as worth, as far as worth is concerned? Do you look at the color of my skin and automatically presume, incorrectly I might add, that my worth somehow, because of my extra melanin or 5 layers of melanin in my skin, somehow my worth, my usefulness is not as yours, being white or without melanin? How do we say it? Without being melanized, without having melanin in the skin. And that's the difference between black and brown. That's it. It's a question of melanin. It isn't a question of anything else except that. But here we are. Worth, the quality of a thing which renders it useful as it is perceived, or which will produce an equivalent good in some other thing. So if you take me and put me in your workplace, will my blackness or brownness, just based on that alone, will it impact the worth of your company? Will me being there, will my being there impact your company's greater good? If the answer to that question is no, just based on the color of my skin, then our worth is not the same. The second word is the word value. That property or those properties of a thing which render it useful or estimable or esteemable. You can see it both ways, because estimable has to do with how a thing is estimated, how it is seen, or the viewpoint, the lens, the optics of the thing. And when you see it, does it have value or esteemable? Is it raised in a complementary position by way of the esteem of others, or the degree of that property or such properties? The real value of a thing is its utility, usability, utility, its power or capacity of procuring or producing good. My God. Now, I think I don't want to swerve from where I feel we need to be tonight, but if I can be very honest, black and brown people have a responsibility as far as those two words are concerned, worth and value. But there's a greater, in my view, responsibility on the side of the majority white culture within this United States culture. The responsibility of black and brown people, in my view, is to make sure we are always making contributions which help others to understand our value, our utility, and our usability. This is why it is so important that we understand I am not in favor of looting. I'm not in favor of burning businesses, rioting. I am in favor of demonstrations, peaceful protests, Second Amendment right. You have the right of free speech, First Amendment right, the right of free speech. You have the right to question inadequacies and ills. That's a God-given right, first of all, and then the Constitution provides that right. So that if we're of equal value, if we have the same worth, just like the penal system, the legal system tends to take the blindfold off and look and see what color the person is that is being brought before the system of law before a decision is rendered. Just like that is true, and it is, the facts and the figures are there, some of which I may touch tonight. But on the other side of things, black and brown people do have the opportunity to try to become whole, made whole, restored, some sense of equality given them by way of an outcry, by way of a demonstration, by way of a refusal, by way of affecting the economy of those who don't have that same pain, of those who don't have that same experience, those who have not been brought under those same sort of castes, so to speak. It was the bus boycott of 1956, I want to say, in Montgomery, Alabama, that was kicked on by the arrest of Rosa Parks, the mother of the civil rights movement, and the bus boycott, and people would get up, black and brown people, 4:30, 5 o'clock, walk to work. They would share cars for those few who had vehicles. But the idea and the understanding was that until the bus owners were affected by their economy, by their money in their pockets, they could not understand the pain of Jim Crowism and overt segregation on the buses. But the longer the bus boycott went on, a year and a half or so, that thing came to a screeching halt, because all of a sudden, because bus owners were going out of business, couldn't afford to maintain their buses. Now there is some sort of equality as far as the pain is concerned. Black and brown people were feeling the pain by way of Jim Crowism and segregation of the South. But now white people, or bus owners who are primarily white at the time, have the opportunity to experience the pain from another area, because pain is pain. And that's what I say about the looting and the fires and so forth and so on. I don't agree with that part of it. I do agree with the demonstrations. I do agree with the protests, because some way there has to be this bringing about of a universal understanding of the pain that black and brown people have been feeling for 400 years with their association with these yet to be United States. And so with that said, here's an article that I want to introduce. It's an article by Noah Y. Kim and Miriam Valverde, dated September 25th, 2020. The article is put out by PolitiFact, PolitiFact, PolitiFact. Post claiming that Breonna Taylor was involved in drug dealing with her ex-boyfriend overstate her involvement in the narcotics investigation that led police to her apartment. They also ignore the fact that much of the evidence linking Breonna Taylor to the investigation is disputed. The following: whether the officers knocked or announced themselves is disputed. Taylor's boyfriend has acknowledged that he fired first at the police officers, but he said that he thought the apartment was being broken into. A no-knock warrant gives law enforcement opportunity to come at an ungodly hour. The element of surprise is really what they're after in case a crime is being carried forth and committed, and you surprise those who are involved in the alleged crime, kick in the door, you have the door ram, and you go in. So now, think of it now. You're at home. We're going to get the exact time in just one moment's time. I have it somewhere in the article, but it's it's after 12 a.m. So this is early in the morning, and when most people are asleep or are thinking about going to sleep, but they're in a very relaxed mode, and you hear your front door being kicked in. Well, you're going to protect your home. Your home is your castle. And I put myself in that situation. Now, where I live, I have some very strong doors. I've invested a lot of money in the doors, alarm systems, and cameras. But if someone was able, and the gates around have locks on them, because I'm not at home all of the time, and I want those who live here, live with me, or live in my home, I should better say, to be protected. But if I'm there and I hear a noise and it sounds like the cavalry is coming in, trust me and believe with all sincerity, there's going to be a defense. And it's not going to be a prayer defense, because in my mind, every person, every male, particularly every homeowner, because you have the Second Amendment right to bear arms, you are not only entitled, but you are duly responsible to protect wherever you live. So this was the note. And Taylor's boyfriend has acknowledged that he fired first at the police officers, but he said that he thought the apartment was being broken into. A 911 emergency call he made shortly after the shooting backs up his claims. They have it on recording. Breonna Taylor, let's get the facts. Breonna Taylor worked for the University of Louisville Health as a full-time ER technician, emergency room technician, and was a former emergency medical technician. Her funeral was held on March 21st, 2020, this year. Kenneth Walker was Taylor's then boyfriend, who was present with her in the apartment during this debacle. Jonathan Mattingly is the Louisville Metro Police, with the Louisville Metro Police Department officer, who joined the department in 2000, became a sergeant in 2009, 9 years, and joined the narcotics division in 2016. Brett Hankinson was a detective, LMPD. Hankinson joined the department in 2003. Miles Cosgrove is an LMPD police officer who transferred to the narcotics division in year 2016. Let's delve further into the case. On September 23rd, Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron. I don't want you to forget that name, because I want to search for the right words. Daniel Cameron, a man of color, the state attorney general, so that is the head attorney of the state of Kentucky. So his office sets the precedent for all city attorney generals, county attorney generals, if you have split off between city and county, as does Jefferson County. You have Bessemer Cutoff, which is part of Jefferson County, and then you have a Jefferson County District Attorney. So all DAs answer to the state DA. He has the preeminence over all the cases of the state. So this is a man of color who is put into place, I might add, under a, wait for it, Republican administration. So somehow there are ties and a lot of allegations. I don't have the time to pilfer through that right now. We may come back to it. But this Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, who has drank the Kool-Aid, somehow, and I can relate to this because of the miseducation of the Negro in the educational process. And it was said many moons ago, there's a book, The Miseducation of the Negro. It may not be on this book case. It's a case that goes from this wall to the other, but I have it in one of the offices. But in the book, it talks about how black people in the country that has disadvantaged them have been handed an education that has been whitewashed as far as the bare facts are concerned, about the black and brown person being deported from in the diaspora from Africa into the Americas, and then not given the benefit of the true happenings of their own historicity. It is said that only the wealthy white were the keepers of the historical facts, and so they spun it as they would. And so this young man is probably one of the, and I'm not making excuses at all, but probably this should be a good case study of what happens even when you have people in powerful positions who are black or brown, and they walk after the same marching orders of the people who have imposed these irregularities for 400 years in this country. Where will and how will people of color ever get equity or be valued if your own people don't see a value in your life? All lives matter is the retort. All lives matter. You say Black Lives Matter because black people in the legal system are the ones that are being impugned and demoralized, devalued, if you will. And if you say that in the wrong context with mixed ethnic groups, people will retort back, well, all lives matter. God said all lives matter. Yes, all lives matter, but all lives are not being challenged to the same degree with the same levels of unfairness as are black and brown lives. So we're just heightening. We're putting the attention where the pain has been for so long. And in your physical body, if you ignore pain, that doesn't make it go away. The day you decide to attend to the pain is the day you can begin having relief. If you're silent in your doctor's office, and you're silent and you have health insurance thanks to the Affordable Health Care Act, which the Republican administration is trying their best to knife. But if you have the opportunity to have medical care, once you are no longer silent about the pain, then the medical community can address your particular concerns. And so here she is, 26 years old of age, shot to death by police in her apartment. And Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron announced that a grand jury would not charge Louisville police officers with the killing of Ms. Taylor. Again, if she was a white 27-year-old citizen with no criminal record, I'm going to get to that in a minute, working feverishly, it seems to me, to upgrade and upscale her life, maybe a poor choice of male companions, this one and the one before, which we'll get to that in a minute's time. But that happens. But is that a reason to die in your own apartment? People aren't supposed to die when they're at home at the hands of the law. It's not supposed to happen. And then further than that, you tell me that you bring together a grand jury, you present your case, and the grand jury decides these persons who have murdered this young woman in her own home, who has broken no laws, once again, back to Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, call the roll. I've been calling it for 2 weeks. Go to the previous episodes, you'll understand. And yet, no one sees that there has been a devaluing here, even when you take the case to the courtroom. Let's go. This 26-year-old black woman was shot to death by police in her apartment, has become an icon of racial injustice once again. And the grief over the Attorney General's announcement sparked more protests in Louisville, where at least 2 police officers were shot. Now let's introduce Jamarcus Glover. Glover was not the man with Taylor on the night she was killed. And according to the Taylor family's lawyer, Taylor had cut ties with Glover before the shooting. But the narcotics department is investigating Jamarcus Glover. They believe Glover is in the home with Breonna Taylor. Police suspected that Taylor was keeping narcotics, or cash for Glover for several reasons. A car registered in her name had stopped at a separate property under surveillance. One, Glover listed her apartment 2 as his home address, and he's having a brush with the law, but not her. Glover frequently traveled, thirdly, between her apartment and the drug house, and fourthly, Glover had picked up a package at her home. I don't think you're supposed to die for those 4 reasons if that particular situation is not involving you, other than by way of association. The facts: she was not asleep in her bed, as it's been previously reported, and Breonna Taylor's boyfriend shot at police officers first. I'm not going to touch Charles Barkley's recent statement, ESPN commentator. I know he's always speaking his mind, but sometimes you can put your foot in your mouth while you're speaking your mind. These claims are true. She was not asleep in her bed. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend shot at police first. According to interviews with Kenneth Walker, Taylor's boyfriend, who was with her in the apartment, the 2 of them were in bed, here it is, at 12:40 a.m. when they heard someone banging loudly on the door. Walker said that he initially feared that it was Glover attempting the previous boyfriend to force his way in. This is his statement. Walker grabbed his gun. He didn't even know it was the police because his report is that they did not announce themselves. Of course, you have one neighbor who said he heard the police mention once softly that they identified themselves as the police. Walker grabbed his gun. New boyfriend grabs his gun, which was legally registered under his name. All legal. According to Walker, both he and Taylor asked who was at the door multiple times but received no answer. The 2 of them were walking toward the door when police used, here it is, a battering ram. It sounds like a bomb going off, to burst into the apartment. Unable to see who was breaking in, Walker, in my mind, justifiably fired his weapon and, according to police, struck an officer in a femoral artery. It's in his leg. Police returned fire, striking Taylor, an innocent woman, several times, multiple times. She was on the warrant as her car and her apartment. This is true. She was on the warrant as a person of concern. Her car was on the warrant by way of her association with her previous boyfriend, Mr. Glover, and her apartment was, according to court records, an area of concern. Again, Taylor herself was not the main target of the narcotics investigation. You're not supposed to die if my black life matters to the same degree as the white lives of the persons who this country was founded for. Black and brown people were imported, kidnapped, and brought here. And the mindset of the country has to change. And it doesn't matter who the president is, the mindset of the country has to change. Taylor's information was on the search warrant based on police belief that her ex-boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, used her home to receive mail, keep drugs, or stash money earned from the sale of drugs, the Louisville Courier Journal reported, the local newspaper, so forth. Taylor had no criminal record, please hear this, and police officers didn't find any drugs, zilch, nil, nerdin. No drugs or illicit cash in her home. She died for nothing. Breonna Taylor, again, 26-year-old black woman, fatally shot by white Louisville Metro Police Department. Officers Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankinson, Miles Cosgrove on March 30th, 2020. The officers entered her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, so forth and so on. Mattingly was hit in the leg. The officers fired 32 shots in return. I'll wait for it for the people in the back of the room. 32 shots. And you tell me, if all lives matter equally in this country, you tell me if that was in a prestigious community in America with two young white people involved. I've already done shows. We've seen the comparisons of how the law enforcement community handles our opposite equals. Okay, ethnic opposite equals. Would this have happened? 32 shots in a prestigious community with two young white people involved in an alleged drug situation or investigation. Wouldn't have happened. The police department fired Hankinson on June 23rd, from March to June 23rd, for blindly firing through the covered patio door and window of Taylor's apartment, according to Police Chief Robert Schroeder. On September 15th, the city of Louisville agreed to pay Taylor's family $12 million and reform police practices. Now, her life isn't worth anything alive but to quell the potential unrests. A week before the grand jury issues its verdict, all of a sudden $12 million come into play. But you fired 32 shots in my home, killing me. My life wasn't worth $12 million to you. This is a $12 million cover-up, in my view. The week before, let's pacify the world. This was not just for the Taylor family. Let's pacify the world of this mortal, and fatal injustice. Let's make up $12 million payoff to cause people to be silent. Go back to sleep until the next one. And I want to do a show on the family's attorney, Mr. Crump. Something has to be said. If we're looking for fairness and equity, yes, I think money causes people to feel the pain. So I agree with the payment. The family needed to profit by this loss of life. But I do think it was the city's attempt to keep things quiet. And I think that sometimes black and brown attorneys representing these families who have been taken advantage of and handled incorrectly and illegally, and the prejudices that have come forth in civil lawsuits, so forth and so on. I think sometimes the message gets lost in the money. I think the money on the one hand makes the message, but on the other hand, it just seems just suspicious to me that a week before, and the attorneys have to be involved in these negotiations. $12 million comes out. It was undisclosed at first, but let's just go on. So the two other officers, so only the one officer who fired in a neighboring, so the wall is worth more than her life, because there's no indictment. These guys, the two other officers involved in the raid, were not indicted. So it led to this lack of an indictment, led to protests furthered around this country. Let's just talk a bit about grand juries. What is a grand jury? Grand juries in the United States are groups of citizens empowered by the United States federal or state law to conduct legal proceedings, chiefly investigating potential criminal conduct and determining whether criminal charges should be brought. So it's an assembled group of citizens chosen by the powers that be. The number varies, the size of the grand jury and the number of grand jurors required to issue an indictment or the lack thereof can vary from state to state and sometimes even within the state. But generally speaking, a grand jury may issue an indictment for a crime, also known as a true bill, based upon the evidence that has been presented to it that there is probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed by a criminal suspect. The federal government is required to use grand juries for all, here it is, felonies, though not misdemeanors, by the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. So on May 2020, the investigation findings were given to Daniel Cameron, the state attorney general. So he's had from May 20th to September 23rd to assimilate the facts and figures, so to speak. But none of these officers in the raid were indicted except for the one officer who shot through a neighboring wall. So how do we level the playing field, so to speak? What do we look at Breonna Taylor's murder, and the states siding with the murderers in plain view, broad daylight? It's almost like the president, it's almost like he can do no wrong. And evangelicals who are supposed to be big on the word of God and truth and justice, siding with, I just want to choose my words so judiciously, siding with wrong and covering it with the frosting of this president is anti-abortion. The one thing, now you can do everything else, but because he takes a position, and again, politics is a matter of the greater good for the people, not perfection. But what is greater than what we have now at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? What is greater than this mode that has been set by this nation's president and the Republican Party, which is now the majority party as far as the Senate's effects, Congress's effects? The House is minority led. Thank God for that. But man, and then needs to be a show dedicated to the memory of former Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader. And to me, it's just so many things. So let's just close. Ginsburg. Let's just close. What can be done? I don't want to. I have so much more, and I can't get into it in this show. But what can be done? What do we do? Now, you don't want to miss next week. I'll delve into this more. I told you once. I'll tell you again. In my view, Jesus is the answer for every problem. Receive Jesus Christ as Lord, and allow His Spirit to begin governing your life and ruling your life, and allow the Holy Spirit to govern and lead in politics, in legislative government, in the part of the government that has to do with lawmaking and law enforcement, so forth and so on. So He is the Prince of Peace. He leads to peace. That's the bottom line. Short of that, very short of that, here are some other things. Number one, vote. The candidates that are being brought into and held accountable for political offices and responsibilities of adjudicating justice for people regardless of their color And I really thought I would have enough time to get into the contrast of the two parties tonight, because basically in these yet to be United States, we are under a two-party system, that of Republicans and Democrats. And most people would be surprised to know that most blacks were once under the Republican Party, because it was known as Lincoln's Party. Lincoln, the signer of the Emancipation Proclamation, who said, if I could keep the slaves and at the same time keep the Union together, I would keep the slaves. But because I believe that slavery it will be the force that breaks up this nation, I'm going to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. With his signing, it brought then the Southern black to the understanding that we need to line up behind this president that has broken this back of this egregious hostility called racism, measured out by way of slavery. So that carried on until the Depression. And I'll talk about it in next week's show, hopefully. And after that, you saw the shifting, this disloyalty from blacks under the Republican administration, and with the coming in later in the 60s with President John F. Fitzgerald Kennedy, and his reaching out to Dr. King, when he was in prison by way of his wife, Coretta Scott King, and his rallying to have King released. I'll get into it next week. And black people begin to shift to see, okay, now this Democratic Party is beginning to line up for the support of and the equity and equitable treatment, worth and value, revaluation, if you will, of black and brown people. So now basically you have a two-party system. So what can be done? Well, we need to see who is for fairness and equity and vote that way. And if people are not accountable, vote them out. But by all means, don't become apathetic and not vote. So lastly, or finally, let's just say, value is infused into a culture by way of perceived contributions. In other words, we must know our history to be able to establish value in the minds of people who have devalued black and brown people. If you don't know that black and brown people built this country, including the White House, black and brown people laid the tracks for the rail system. Black and brown people crushed rocks as falsely imprisoned persons so that the rail system and the coal could be mined, and so forth and so on. Black and brown people built this country, but if you don't know your history, you cannot infuse it into conversations. You are left with believing that black and brown people's best contribution in America has been sports. Thank God for that. Probably made more millionaires that way, but there have been other contributions of significance. You're left to think that that's it. That's all that black people can do. And white people who are challenged by that thought even see that as some sort of competition. And so, for example, let's just try to end here. It is important to seek legal retribution in all cases of injustice. You can't be silent. I was in a store recently, and a young white salesperson, I was just picking up some shirts, and there were some casual shirts that anyone that knows me, I have this thing that everything has to be folded around me, so forth and so on. So I have all those casual shirts folded. And then there were a couple of dress shirts that were, in the packaging and so forth and so on. And so I asked the young man, because sometimes this particular style of shirts, or the shirt maker, based on my build, one size may fit in one style of shirt, versus another style of shirt, another size may fit better. So I told him, I said, okay, I need to get into the dressing room because I'm going to try on these shirts before I potentially buy them. And he said, oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He's young. He's probably 21, 22. He said, I'll get you into the room. He said, now, which shirts are you trying on? I said, well, excuse me? See, what I'm saying is you have to hold people accountable for dog whistling, little beyond the periphery allusions to inequities. Not in a nasty way, but demand. Justice has to be demanded. Someone once said power is never surrendered willingly. It has to be taken. I think respect has to be demanded. And so as I was walking away, he said, yeah, those shirts, speaking of the casual shirts, he said, definitely by all means try those. He says, but as I'm walking off, he said, but don't unpack these. Don't, and that was his statement, don't unfold these. I said, excuse me? I said, you made the wrong statement, sir. I said, if I need to try on a shirt to ensure the size fits, I said, I will unpack these as well as unfold these to ensure the fit. He said, oh, sir, you're right. I apologize. You're exactly right. Because you've seen this happen all the time. People of other colors will try on anything in a store to make sure of the fit. It doesn't matter that it was in a packaging or not, because they'll just put it on another table and sell it otherwise. But I fortunately for him, I knew about this particular maker in the folded shirts. And I said, I don't need to even try those on, but I needed to get you to understand that you're not going to talk to me like that. And I'm going to spend my money here, because my next response would have been, I'm not buying anything from this store. You see, we can't be in such a situation of dire need of what someone else provides. And that's why it's so important to support Black and brown businesses wherever possible. And then on the other side of that paradigm, it's important that Black and brown business owners give the best. They give the best service, provide the best product, the best for their means, are consistent with opening and closing times, so forth and so on, so that you don't have this unparalleled treatment where you're spending your money and you're trying to support people that look like you, but the people that look like you have this same bias whereby they almost make you feel that you had to privilege. So there's a lot that has to be learned, and this is why I believe programs like this are important. So you can hear me say to you, vote, vote, vote. Involve yourself with the census 2020. Its effects are going to last for 10 years for your community. So the next 10 years, and I've understood that the state of Alabama is last as far as the predicted number of population, the population of the state in various pockets, and their responses to the census to verify this information. It's very important. So let's finally challenge ourselves as people of color to be fact checkers. When someone tells you something in a store, law enforcement, respectfully, after it's over, after the event, or in other situations, even in church, I say to my members, fact check me. Make sure I'm not just telling you something in the name of preaching. We have a Bible. We have a constitution. Stores have policies. Schools have policies. Check. Don't just because someone is in a position of authority, take what they tell you, because that weakens our voice. It impacts the teller as well as the receiver of this information. If you have children, you're training your child not to be a fact checker for the validity of information. Vet the information. So as I close each time, I must tell you that business philosopher Jim Rohn makes the statement, Sincerity is not a test of truth. We must not make this mistake. He must be right. He is so sincere. It is possible to be sincerely wrong. We can only judge truth by truth and sincerity by sincerity. And just as there is a time to keep silent, there is a time to speak. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 7. A time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. Remember, I told you first, silence is only golden until one's family and friends are negatively affected by wrongdoing. As the adage says, silence is compromise. Silence is complicity with erroneous thinking. Silence is agreement with sanitized history. Silence is co-signing with control, racist, bigoted, and supremacy mentalities. Liberty and justice both end in silence. Until next week at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Please, if you're viewing us tonight on Facebook or whenever you do, go over to YouTube and help increase that format as well. You don't have to stay, but it doesn't cost you a dime, but it will help us empirically to increase our footprint and our presence as far as our cyber audience is concerned. And so thank you to all of our Facebook viewers. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for YouTube viewers. Thank you for tagging and sharing the link and links. So until next week at this very same time, you remember we can never be silent again. Until then, you seek for a leading of what you can do to make a difference and impact injustice. Till then, God bless.